Today I'm going to talk about hyperinflation. I want to cover some of the facts, and I want to cover some of the myths of hyperinflation, and I want to make some comparisons to where hyperinflation has happened in other parts of the world and take a look and see if it's something we need to consider as far as it happening here in the United States. Now you'll have to bear with me a little bit today. I've had a little bit of a cold, been a little bit under the weather, but I had taken the time and typed all this out. I wanted to make sure I didn't leave out any important facts, and this is a subject that can be a little complicated, a little confusing, so I'll try and make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. Okay, in order to have hyperinflation, you must have two elements. Number one would be an increase in the money supply, and number two would be an increase in the velocity of money, how fast money travels through the economy. How fast is money changing hands for goods and services? Now we know the Federal Reserve has been increasing the money supply. They've been pumping a tremendous amount of liquidity into the system to stop deflation. But the velocity of money has continued to slow because of a drop in consumer spending. Banks and people are hoarding more dollars because of the uncertainties in the economy. Therefore, hyperinflation cannot take place unless the velocity of money starts to increase. People would have to start borrowing and spending to increase velocity, and income to debt is too high. If, in one sense, the credit and housing bubble was a form of hyperinflation, the price of homes were quickly rising, and people were borrowing against the equity and spending like crazy. These actions created an increase in the money supply and the velocity of money. And what put a stop to this madness? When debt compared to income rises too quickly and people are either unable or unwilling to buy homes at current prices, you get deflation. For those who preach the theory of hyperinflation happening here in the United States, there are a couple of things we must first consider. Number one, the United States has reserve currency status. All commodities around the world are traded in U.S. dollars. Unless this changes, there will continue to be a demand for U.S. dollars. Number two is more than 2/3 of all debt in the world is in U.S. dollars. Again, this creates demand for our currency. Now, people will make comparisons to Weimar Germany during the 1920s or Zimbabwe today. But you have to remember one thing. There was never a global demand for either of these countries' currencies. Printing and spending caused the money supply and velocity of money to increase rapidly, destroying the currency. Now, can hyperinflation happen here in the United States? Yes. Is it likely to? No. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, in order for us to set the stage for hyperinflation in the United States, we would have to lose reserve currency status. With commodities no longer being traded in U.S. dollars, that would kill the demand for our currency. If that were to happen, or even talk of that happening, I believe we would have much bigger things to worry about. Remember, people, wars have been started over much less. The government would pull out all stops to keep this from happening. Number two, remember, if there's no way to couple wages to inflation, you get deflation. So what would happen if wages stayed the same and say milk went to $10 a gallon and bread went to $10 a loaf? How much milk and bread do you think the stores would sell? Very little, right? Just like the housing market. Demand for milk and bread would drop. The prices are at a point where people are either unable or unwilling to buy, and you would get deflation. Now I want to talk a little bit about precious metals and what role they play in this economic environment. There have been a lot of people talking about buying gold and silver, and I believe gold is the best bet for wealth preservation. Gold will retain its purchasing power and hedge against inflation. But notice I said wealth preservation. Some people have the idea that if the United States were to hyperinflate, that they would become instantly wealthy from owning gold and silver. You have to look at it in terms of purchasing power. If an ounce of gold today were to buy you, say, a nice mountain bike, An ounce of gold during hyperinflation would buy you a nice mountain bike. Okay? You have preserved your wealth. Of course, if we hyperinflate, your fixed debts, such as mortgage and auto loans, would be easier to pay off. I do believe it is smart to own some gold and silver, and I personally do. Of course, there is the possibility that the government could confiscate your gold. The Gold Confiscation Act of 1933, signed into law by President Roosevelt, forbid the hoarding of gold coins, gold bullion, and gold certificates. You were required by law to turn your gold in to the nearest Federal Reserve bank, branch, or agency in which you were given paper dollars in exchange. Whoever willfully violated any provision of this executive order was subject to a $10,000 fine, 10 years in prison, or both. And it could happen again. We definitely are living in uncertain times. There are several ways that this could all play out. But regardless of the outcome, there's one thing that I am sure about. Our lifestyles and our way of life will drastically change. So, I kind of covered some of the facts and some of the myths of hyperinflation. I touched a little bit on precious metals. Like I said, I believe that this could play out one of several different ways. I'm keeping a close eye again on the bond market, keeping my eye on a couple of other indicators going on with the markets, and if I see anything change, or the fact that hyperinflation would or could be a way that this will play out, I'll be certain to make a video and get it out to you guys and give you my 2 cents on it. But I thank you for those who subscribed, and I look forward to your comments, and I'll be making other videos here within the week.